Welcome to our virtual town hall on the Hopewell Valley Regional School District bond referendum. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We have assembled a panel that has expertise on all the aspects of November 4th, the bond referendum vote. We will share details and answer your questions to help you feel informed before you go vote. This town hall is being recorded and will be posted on our website, hvrsd.org/vote. A little more than a year ago, our community decided against the bond referendum. We listened and revised the proposal to reflect the voters' feedback. Now, as we envision the future of Hopewell Valley schools, we are at a crossroads. Enrollment growth and aging infrastructure are putting increasing pressure on our buildings. We are doing our best to continue the high standard that our community values, but without the ability to expand and improve our schools, we will not be able to maintain smaller class sizes and avoid widespread redistricting. Emergency repairs will continue draining our annual budget that is meant for educational needs. We need to give our community more of a say in our referendum by packaging these projects into 2 ballot questions. Question 1 would allow the district to address immediate large-scale building needs that improve safety and comfort for our students and our faculty. These projects would end disruptions to class time over leaky roofs and heating and air conditioning breakdowns. Question 2 includes the expansion of both toll gates and Bear Tavern schools. The added space would move students out of trailers and into school buildings. The ability to accommodate more students at 2 schools would ease the strain on all of our elementary schools. These questions address different needs, but all projects are essential to best serve our students. Question 2 can only pass if question 1 also is approved. If both questions pass, the district receives $20.2 million in state aid toward the improvements. You'll hear much more about the funding strategies and the building needs from our panelists. So let me take a minute to introduce the important people that are in this Zoom webinar with me today. First, I have Bob Calavita, the Assistant Superintendent of Business and the Board Secretary. Tom Quinn, a longtime Director of Facilities for the district. Melissa Laurie, the Principal of Tollgate Grammar School. Christopher Turnbull, Principal of Timber Lane Middle School. And 2 of our board members, Anita Williams-Galliano, the Board President, and Mark Peters, the Finance and Facilities Chair. Our professional consultants who are joining us today are very familiar with this project. That includes one of our architects, Dan Scatoni, bond counsel, Tony Salamini, and financial advisor, Danielle Marino. We'll start for tonight's schedule by looking at the projects that are proposed at all 6 of our schools. Our financial team will explain the strategies to secure state aid and upfront funding for these improvements. Then we will hear directly from the 2 principals about the daily challenges they deal with the space shortages and building issues. We will wrap up with some important information and reminders for the voters. You will have an opportunity to submit your questions throughout this town hall. After each segment, we'll answer a few questions related to that topic. Please submit your questions through the Zoom chat, and I will direct them to the appropriate panelists to get your answer. The questions will only be visible to the hosts and panelists so that we can keep everyone focused on the town hall tonight. We'll answer as many questions as we can before the town hall concludes at 7:30. Some similar questions may be consolidated. If you don't have your question answered tonight and you'd like us to follow up on that question, please email us at vote@hvrsd.org. Let's start out by asking our architect about our building needs. Dan, can you speak about this as not only an architect, but as a Hopewell Valley parent?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Treese. I have the privilege of being a parent in Hopewell Valley as well. My family and I moved to this district about 5 years ago, specifically for your schools. And now there are schools, so it's very lucky to be part of that. I have one student at Bear Tavern, and I understand the needs at that school in particular with the amount of kids coming in and the need for space there. So that's first and foremost at that school, and I understand it. There are critical infrastructure needs that we need throughout the district. And the best part is with the referendum, you get state aid that's otherwise unavailable as well. So when it comes down to the state aid and the critical need that you have for things like HVAC and other infrastructure, we want those facilities to match sort of the education that we like to see from Hopewell Valley.
That's true, and thank you, Dan. And we know that, just much like you as a parent, that people are attracted to this district based on the quality of education that we provide to our students. And we would be able to keep up that level of programming. We won't be able to do that, rather, if we don't have the space that we need and some of these repairs that we need. Two people are very familiar with our facility needs are the Assistant Superintendent, Bob Calavita, and the board member, one of our board members, Mark Peters, who chairs the Finance and Facility Committee. Bob and Mark, I know that we've had many conversations over the years over these issues. Could you talk a little bit about that, specifically the roofs, for example? Are we there, Mr. Calavita?
It's my first Zoom meeting. So I'll start over. The roofing and other building needs are in question one of this referendum. We have over 800,000 square feet of roofing in the district, and this referendum will address only around 180,000 square feet of the roofs. We're only going to be replacing sections of the roofing that have a warranty expiration date of 2026 or earlier. Now, we've received a lot of questions about roof warranties over the past several weeks and why we haven't used them to replace these roofs. Well, roof warranties simply don't cover normal wear and tear. They're designed to cover defects, material defects in the product. It's along the same lines as a car warranty. That's not going to cover brakes and tires and other mechanical issues like that. In addition, these types of warranties are prorated and only cover costs, less costs as roofs age.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And I'll just add here that, as the board, we're always concerned about whether the facilities are appropriately supporting the education that the community is expected from the district. And unfortunately, like a lot of the challenges that the facilities face, our roofs are showing every day. And we've heard a lot from the community about some of the challenges that we've seen. We've had to move students out of certain areas. We've had to close off areas like the Bear Tavern Media Center when the roofs leak. And while our facilities team has been doing a really nice job repeatedly patching them, we're kind of at the point where these Band-Aid fixes just are not working anymore. So we are really at this point now where we're asking the public for their help with that question number one for the roofs.
Thank you, Mark and Bob. And I know the roofs, I asked specifically about the roofs because these keep coming up in some of the questions that as we go around the community and talk about the referendum. Another issue that we've been facing and our kids and our faculty and our parents have been experiencing and asking questions about is our HVAC systems as being one of those projects that's on there. Dan, could you talk to us a little bit about those projects, that big HVAC project part of the referendum?
Thank you. So HVAC is a big part of the referendum. It's critical infrastructure to the district. You need heat to have school during the critical times of the school year. And we're touching HVAC at all of the schools in this case, and most of them. There are critical needs, things like heating, cooling. They're at the end of their lives. These things don't last 15, 20 years all the time. And these are systems that are at the end of their life and we need to replace now, and they can't be deferred any longer. I think that's important to note that these are things that if they defer any longer, these are equipment pieces are looking like they'll fail. So we're going to replace some equipment at all schools. And then Timberlane Gym, for instance, is an example. I think is the last gym that you don't have air conditioning in. So we want to bring that up to the same standard that you already have in your other buildings. So again, critical infrastructure systems that need to be replaced that can't be deferred any longer.
Thank you, Dan. And I know that Tom, you're very familiar with our current situations with HVAC systems. Tom, can you talk about the difference in the efficiency between the older systems that we have that are becoming outmoded and are very old versus the new equipment. As we replace that, how will that change efficiencies for us if we replace those items?
Absolutely. There's a significant difference. I track the natural gas usage through the therms of energy that are used, and the buildings that we have replaced the old boiler systems with the new high efficiency boilers, we have cut our gas use practically in half. A good example is Hopewell Elementary, an 80+ thousand square foot building, currently uses less gas than the 48,000 square foot Tollgate building. In addition, on the other HVAC systems, specifically at Timberlane, right now it's outside air over coil directly. We want to move to an energy recovery so that the outside air is brought in through energy recovery units and not directly over the heating and cooling coils, which is a much more efficient way of handling it.
Thank you. Those are some very good points, Tom. And thank you for that explanation. Of course, safety is always a priority for me and my administrative team, for our families. Tom, can you talk about the doors and how replacing those in the referendum would help increase our safety?
Yes, the classroom doors at Bear Tavern and Hopewell Elementary date back to about the age of the buildings from the early 1960s. The outside doors don't close properly. They swell. They're falling apart in the framing edges, and the inside doors are they're not made at this current standard. So we're looking to increase them to a better fire rating and better safety glass on those.
Thank you, Tom. There are also other outside projects that would improve the safety of the building. Dan, could you talk to our audience a little bit about those outside projects?
Yes, so we have some other projects, for instance, site work and other things that need to be addressed throughout the district. We have some things like paving. We have some covered walkways specifically at Bear Tavern and Timberlane need to be replaced and brought up to increase some safety. That's from things overhead. And we also have some storm drainage at Stony Brook for site work as well to mitigate some water infiltration into the building over there. And it's important to note that these projects, along with HVAC, are also eligible for state aid. So these safety critical infrastructure projects that are fall outside the building as well are eligible for state aid.
Thank you, Dan. One question that we've often heard in the community is why, for example, why haven't we replaced these doors that have been around since 1960, right? Why, what has the district been doing to maintain the buildings over the years? Tom, can you talk a little bit about that, the maintenance of the buildings over the years?
Sure. We take care of our buildings through routine maintenance. We have a work order system that not only has preventative maintenance projects, but also emergent projects and things that are necessary. We've been patching roofs, HVAC systems, concrete, but we're at the point where those systems are too old and worn out to just continue fixing them. They need to be replaced. We also plan for capital projects, and Bob can talk a little bit more about that, but we've been doing capital projects since the last referendum.
Thanks, Tom. As a lot of folks know, we do have a finance facilities committee here in the districts, and we do a lot of discussion with that group on what our building needs and how we fund them. For example, since the last referendum in 2016, we've done in excess of $10 million worth of capital projects, most of them coming directly from our capital reserve. We've used this fund for our most critical items as projects as they've developed, and including security vestibules, emergency generators, to name a few, sewer repairs, paving projects, and many, many HVAC projects as they've come up. As much as we can, we try to leverage the use of our capital reserve with state grants. Now, there are state grants out there that appear on an occasional basis. They can provide up to 40% of eligible costs for a project. In fact, we have a project going on right now at Central High School, a $1.4 million boiler project that we're getting 40% coverage by the state. Unfortunately, these grants aren't always available, and they come up sporadically. And if we have the money in our capital reserve, because you must fund the entire portion of the project and then be reimbursed by the state. If we can fund that, we can take advantage of these grants. And we've done that over the past, 20 years or so as they pop up. But again, they don't always appear, and we have to be prepared when they do. The unfortunate thing is we can no longer cover the scope of these projects with our capital reserve or our annual budget. And when we complete building projects through a referendum, we're able to get funding for all projects that are eligible. And the majority of the projects during this referendum are eligible for that funding from the state.
Thank you. Thank you both for giving us that thorough explanation. So let's talk. We've talked about question 1 and the projects that are in there. So let's talk about question 2. Remember that question 2 can only pass if question 1 passes. Dan, could you please talk about the proposals for the additions to Bear Tavern and Tollgate?
Thank you. The addition of Bear Tavern, we're looking at 8 to 10 classrooms, so we can do 8 classrooms in a bidding scenario. We can look to do 2 more given budget. And we're looking at the same sort of scenario. Those are classrooms with pre-K and toilet rooms. They can be used for that. And then it's the same scenario at Tollgate with 6 classrooms. At Bear Tavern, inside that addition, the idea is to have the addition, get rid of the trailers, bring those students into the building, and also offer critical spaces for child study team and speech therapy. We also have some small group instruction rooms for breakouts that are needed in that building, and then some other infrastructure that goes in with that. Same thing at Tollgate, except in those cases, we're looking at a workroom, and then we're looking at ADA accessible bathrooms for that building as well. And these are both in the rear of Tollgate and in the rear of Bear Tavern for additions. There's other renovations that go along with Tollgate as well in question 2, and they entail an ADA accessible bathroom that's lacking right now at the gymnasium and an office, a larger nurses suite that's accessible so you can properly serve your student needs from the nurses suite, and a small group instruction as well. And that's also needed as a breakout space, a cloud space for that school district as well. So those are your projects in question 2.
Thank you, Dan. As we mentioned earlier, the community formed this updated referendum and which projects went into which questions. Originally, we had one big question, and now, based on the feedback we got from you, members of the community, we've split it into 2 questions. Anita, could you talk a little bit about that? Speak to us about why we incorporated this feedback in the way that we did.
Yes. So following the last referendum, we did a lot of listening around the community. Dr. Treese had some listening sessions, but we clearly heard that we wanted to remove, or the community wanted us to remove, some of what would be called vanity or extra products or projects. So we focus then on our practical needs, our very practical needs, what would be needed to keep safety, quality of education present for our students. So that would be in question 1. We also heard loud and clear that the turf project was not well received, and we removed that, but looked more broadly at the HVAC work that may have come up in the meantime or needed to be considered after the second, after the first referendum push. So that we considered in the 2016 referendum, and that was a holdover. So we put those items back in. The other big difference at this time is been in the regular conversations with elected officials around the region and community, the boroughs and township, about pilot projects and enrollment growth. It has been a regular conversation with all involved, which these conversations led to us having a commitment from the Hopewell Township of $16.1 million towards the Bear Tavern expansion. Whenever that money becomes available to us, it will be used strictly for paying down the debt for the projects of question 1 and 2, and lowering the tax impact to our parents and community members.
Thank you, Anita. Now let's see if we have any questions about the projects in the chat. So how you can ask questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. After we answer each topic, if there's similar questions, we will consolidate those so that for the sake of time. So I'm trying to see if there's anything here. Want to provide an answer to? Okay, here's a question for Tom to address directly. There was a question, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit when we were talking before, Tom. Someone asked, why have these doors not been replaced since 1960? I want to circle back to that. Could you answer that question for the audience member?
Sure. The district has replaced many doors throughout the district over the last several years. Some of the doors were original steel doors and they were in good shape, so you don't replace a door that's in good shape. But now they're becoming deteriorated and starting to fall apart and beyond their useful life. As far as the interior doors, again, at Central High School, we have replaced many interior doors, and we continue to do that. But we're at a point now where we can no longer afford it out of our regular budget.
There's also a question here about why is it that question 2 can only pass if question 1 passes? And I'm going to attack that one, but I also want our finance chair, Mr. Peters, if you can also, why don't you go first to answer that question? Because I know what my answer is, but I want to tap you as the chair of the Finance and Facilities Committee.
Well, in general, it's just a requirement that we have when we put these questions together, right? We thought long and hard about how we were going to address this round of the referendum after we spent a lot of time hearing from the community. And as a committee and then as a board, made the determination that we wanted to make this split based on the required items that we thought were very important. And then obviously the second piece that, while important, we know we're going to be getting some aid from the township on to be able to help expand some of the schools. In order for that second question to pass, number 1 must pass. That is the way that it is designed. That is the way that it is set up when we put these referendum questions out there in the state of New Jersey. So we had to follow that suit. We did think a lot, and I want to make sure the public understands this. We did think a lot about putting those questions together and the pros and cons of doing that, and made a decision as a board to separate them so we could truly spend the time in educating the town, educating our community around what is all in question 1, with that state aid supporting it, right? And then obviously the second piece with the support from the township that we are hopefully going to be able to get. Whatever you'd like to elaborate on, I'd welcome.
Absolutely. And the importance of fixing those infrastructure projects, putting on extensions and expansion when we haven't fixed the infrastructure projects is really important for us to keep doing what we do. Bob, Bear Tavern is receiving $16 million from the state, or actually from the township. Can you explain the pilot funding and how that all works? Because folks are saying, well, you're getting this 16.1 from the township as a support for support, right? Why is that on the referendum? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Unfortunately, sure, Dr. Treese. Unfortunately, at this time, we have been working in earnest with the township, and there is a pledge for us to receive the $16 million. Right now, that $16 million is hung up. There is a pending lawsuit and it's being pushed up to the Supreme Court in New Jersey, and that money is not accessible to us right now. We are at a critical need right now. We have folks coming into Bear Tavern that we need to do something with that building, and the way to get it right now in the short term is to do a referendum and get that project started. The design would be once we get it started and the money becomes free, we'll start to apply that, as Anita said earlier in the presentation. We'll do that to reduce the burden on the taxpayer annually in our debt service. So
what happens? Here's a question that keeps coming up. What happens if the referendum doesn't pass, right? So redistricting is definitely and is always a reality when the district is growing as quickly as ours is. So when I'm talking specifically about question 2, right? We know what happens if we don't fix the critical infrastructure pieces of this referendum. When we designed question 1, the board came to us and we went to the board and we said, this is our best strategy for planning to get ahead of these projects. Folks keep asking, why haven't you kept up on these projects over the course of the years, right? When you are capped at 2% for your annual budget and inflation is outpacing, which we all know, nothing is rising at 2%. When the majority of this over $100 million budget is tied up in teaching salaries, staff salaries, healthcare, right? To provide this educational experience for all of our students that people are attracted to our district to have. When we have our budget mostly tied up into that, you put money aside for a budget for facilities, and we don't change that budget over the course of years because we don't have it to expand that budget. So you keep planning and putting things on your list, and in that time, things age and fail just like in your house, right? But we have multiple buildings where these things are happening over time, and things don't last as long as they used to, right? So one of the things that we need to understand is if this doesn't pass, this is the long-range plan for the district to get ahead of some of these projects that we just simply can't keep putting off, and we can't keep, planning for when stuff is failing at such an exponential rate. This is a way to also access state aid that you cannot access any other way. You can't access the $22 million, right, that the state is willing to give us toward these major infrastructure projects if we continue to save. So in essence, as a district, we're leaving money on the table that other taxpayers are accessing, right, through their bond referendum, and like you see in other districts that are close to us, Princeton, Lawrence, right, that are passing their referendum. They're accessing this tax funds that you, the community, are already paying into. So if it doesn't pass, what will we see? We're going to see the reality is the district will continue growing as quickly as it is, and we are already living that. But without the space and we can't take the pressure off the schools, and redistricting will become much, much more common, and our students will not be able to move out of those trailers at Bear Tavern and Tollgate. And of course, we will expect the class size to keep growing.
Rosetta, if I could interject there on the question 1. We currently have 16 classrooms at Bear Tavern School that are suffering with a lack of air conditioning. We're supporting it with portable units. We're unable to get the parts to fix the existing equipment because it's so outdated. If the referendum fails, we will have to go out for a capital project to replace that air conditioning system without state funding.
And if the referendum doesn't pass, again, we said that the $20 million goes away. The $20 billion of state aid and upfront funding that received toward that list will go away. Bob, if question 2 passes and then the township pays the 16.1, how do we know that the money will be used to reduce the tax burden on the schools, and the schools won't spend it on something else, for example? Would we be required to spend it on this, or is it open for us to just do whatever with? Because folks, we could just take the money and do whatever we want with it.
When we strike, the agreement we're going to have with the township on the 16.1 million will have a clause in the contract that will state that this money is to be used for the debt service. The district will not be able to spend it on anything else but the debt service related to the bond referendum.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And Dan, what is the cost per building? Is that the best way to look at these projects since it's major work and has already been done at the high school? How should we look at that in terms of the cost per building?
So I have a breakout of costs per building in the referendum that the board has previously shared, and it's of the question 1, for instance, of the $58.4 million in question 1. About $9.5 million goes to the Central High School. That school in particular had a lot of work done in the previous referendum, but there are still HVAC and roofing needs, for instance. So there's $9.5 million of projects at the high school that the board has talked about. At Timber Lane, because of the breadth of HVAC and roofing, we're looking at $20.5 million. There's a lot of HVAC there for projects. Bear Tavern in question 1 for renovations, there's about 9.9. Hopewell Valley, or I'm sorry, Hopewell Elementary is about 9.6. And then Stony Brook receives about 3.2, and then Tollgate is 5.3. Those are ballparks of all the referendum projects of roofing, HVAC renovations that are in question one. So it is broken out. And again, those projects are eligible for state aid. So you're getting that cost. And I think it's very important to note that if you don't have those pass, that you're going to be paying the full cost to do those projects that are not able to be taken out of the budget right now.
Thank you, Dan. So, okay, let us move on to more questions later. But for now, let's talk about the funding strategy and the state aid. Tony, as the bond counsel on this referendum, can you give us a brief explanation about bond borrowing?
Sure. Great. Thank you, Dr. Treese. And I think kind of the points you just made are really valid points that I think really need to be stressed. I get the pleasure of working for school districts throughout the state of New Jersey, and your story is not unique. The 2% tax levy cap has really hamstrung districts' ability throughout the state of New Jersey to address facilities improvements and large-scale facilities projects within their budget. That's why, as any of your residents probably have seen, if you've read the newspaper online, there's been referendum up and down the state for the last couple of years. And the reason for that is districts can't afford to replace their doors, to fix their roofs within their general fund operating budget because of that 2% cap. And what districts, as you've mentioned, a bunch of your neighboring districts have decided to do is go to referendum, and which basically then allows you to take advantage of that state aid, which in your case, we're talking about over $20 million. So if these are projects that you're going to fund anyway, you might as well fund them with the assistance from the state of New Jersey. Additionally, if you were able to save that much money to do these projects, which is financially impossible and just not feasible, I think one can argue that it's not an equitable way to make improvements to a school facility, because you're not spreading the cost out over the useful life of the project and all the residents that will be utilizing those facilities. The residents that live in your communities today would be paying 100% of the cost of a roof or HVAC that's going to last 20 years. So by being able to borrow the money, you not only take advantage of the debt service aid, but you spread the cost out over the useful life of the project, which is the fairest way that most people think to spread the cost of projects for public finance purposes. Why should the people that live in your community pay for 100% of the cost in today's dollars? It's kind of the fairest way to do it. And like we said, you're taking advantage of that state aid, where if you don't get a referendum passed and you still do these projects, your residents are going to pay 100%. And your residents are already paying for your neighboring communities. So I think, and I think Bob will attest to this, I think this is a good strategy that the school district has really thought about using.
Yeah, Tony, there's no doubt that the bond referendum is a strategy that we should be using. As Dr. Treese mentioned a few moments ago, there's no way we can cover these improvements through our annual budget. The increases in staff salaries, all staff salaries, healthcare, or just to name a few, are way outstripping our 2% cap. We are able to budget somewhere in the area of $1 million a year for building repairs. We have a highly skilled staff in the district, and they're able to do a lot of repairs, saving the district thousands of dollars than if we went to contracted work. But we can't do it all. And as you just mentioned, it would take decades for us to get all the stuff that we need done. The referendum is just a way that we can get that outside money. We've already tried to do it with state grants that pay 40%. It's just that those state grants are not as readily available as we'd like. And again, you'd have to have that kind of money up front. And we just don't have that amount of money in our general budget or even in our capital reserve. It's limited funding. We also try to do other things to save money by purchasing, for example, high efficiency lighting at a fraction of market cost through a Board of Public Utilities program. And we use our in-house electrician and other maintenance workers to assist him to get that done at a fraction of what a contractor would cost to do. So we try to do as much as we can on our own and leverage state funding when we can, but a referendum is a way to get a lot of projects done before we wind up having to have critical failures.
Thank you, Bob and Tony. So now that we've heard about how state aid reduces taxpayer share on project costs, let's hear from our financial advisor, Danielle Marino. Could you talk to us about the tax impact?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Treese. So the Hopewell Valley community is made up of 3 separate towns. As you see on the screen, these are the tax impacts for question 1. So Hopewell Borough's average tax impact is $248 over the 20-year expected term of the bonds. Hopewell Townships is $284, and Pennington Boroughs is $294. And the tax impacts differ because the average home values in each town differ, as well as the assessed values in each town. For question 2, Hopewell Boroughs tax impact is an average of $164. Hopewell Townships is $188, and Pennington Boroughs is $194. It's important to remember that the tax impact is based on the assessed value of your home, not the market value. Market value is what you would sell your home to another individual for. Assessed value can often be significantly less than the market value, which is, again, what your home might sell for. You can find your assessed value by searching the Mercer County database, and the website is pip.mercercounty.org. It's also located on your quarterly tax bill as well. So there's multiple places where you can find your home's value. And then seniors who meet income criteria might also qualify for tax relief that mitigates a change in the tax impact. There is currently now 1 application for the 3 programs: the Senior Tax Freeze, the Anchor Program, and Stay NJ.
Thank you, Danielle, for that valuable information. I'd like to go back to Bob to explain the pilot funding question that comes up quite a bit in the community. Bob, can you please fill us in a bit more about that?
Sure. I'll just reiterate what we said a little bit ago from the question. But Hopewell Township has committed $16.1 million from pilot revenue towards the Bear Tavern expansion. We had many meetings with them, and they were they were willing to agree to cover the costs of the Bear Tavern expansion. As I mentioned, the money is not currently available. It's in litigation. There's major litigation over the pilot development. We've been promised by the township that when that litigation has ended, those funds will become available, and they'll pledge them to us in a formal document. And we are actually working on that formal document as we speak. That will bring those funds to cover the debt service when it becomes available. So we are confident and hopeful that money will come through to reduce the tax impact to everybody in the valley. That money will benefit everybody, not just Hopewell Township.
Thank you for that, Bob. Danielle and Anita, probably Danielle could probably answer this. Could you please elaborate more on the impact of the increase of the tax on Hopewell residents? And also, I'm wondering that some of these folks are wondering why we need to raise tax, considering the tax rates in Hopewell are already high as compared to our neighboring townships.
So the tax impact is based off of the debt service with state aid from these projects that you will receive. So that is including the $20.2 million that we've been referencing. And then also, the district is asking these referendum questions, knowing there would be an increase to the tax levy on the local residents. It's similar to Princeton and Lawrence. They did very similar type things. These were all increases over what they're currently paying in taxes.
Dr. Treese, if I could add a little bit to that, I see the question in the chat. We do understand that we are very sympathetic to the tax burden in not only Hopewell Valley, but also the greater state of New Jersey is dealing with high taxes. The reason why we need to raise taxes for this referendum is because, as we were talking earlier, the general fund budget is not enough to cover the expenses that we're looking for the referendum. So we need to raise additional money, which, unfortunately causes an additional raise in taxes.
Mm-hmm. If I can ask you an extension question about that. So we are capped at 2%. We've said that multiple times. Why can't we just raise the 2% tax?
It's state law. I mean, it's basically state law. It's written into code that budgets cannot tax levies cannot increase greater than 2%. As we've talked during our budget process, there are a few waivers that allow us to exceed 2%, but you have to meet certain conditions. And we have met them over the past several years. We did get an enrollment waiver in the past year for increased enrollment. We didn't meet that criteria for probably 15 to 16 years. We did not qualify for that. And we also qualify for a health benefit waiver, again, due to the rapidly increasing cost of healthcare in the state of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. There's a question also extends that says they're curious of why isn't Princeton Township capped at 2%? So all school districts are capped at 2%. We're all capped, right?
I'm not sure where. Yeah, I'm not sure where that came from. I mean, the basic tax levy is capped at 2%.
Mm-hmm.
There are, as I said, there's those available waivers if they're available to you, but nobody is not capped at 2%.
Yes, and this is something that schools administrators have been fighting and for legislation since this cap was put in place back in the Christie administration. So this has been in place for years, and that cap is something that all school districts are feeling and struggling with. Bob, can school districts affect how the boroughs and townships split the tax burden for each area, or is that an agreement between the local municipalities? Is each municipality taxed equally? This is a question that we pulled out of the chat.
Oh, that's a good question. We do not have any control over that. We have a regional school district. Regional school districts have several different ways of apportioning the tax. Our tax is based upon an assessed value. So what happens is the county tax assessor gets information from each of the municipalities in our area. They take that data, they quote unquote equalize it to make it fair and equal, and then they take that equalized value and they come up with a ratio. And that's how they determine who pays a portion of each dollar. There's another way to do it. Other municipalities do it based on per pupil. They say, Hopewell Township has this many pupils, Hopewell Borough has that many, and Pennington Borough has this many, and they take those numbers, add them up, divide them, and that's the percentage of what you get. To do that, to change how we do that, would require a referendum that must pass in each municipality separately. There are certain advantages to a per pupil. There's certain advantages to a rateable based method, but we can't change that. That would have to be a referendum that is undertaken by the municipalities. It's a process. You'd have to petition the county assessor, and they have to determine that there would be a benefit, a general benefit. It can't benefit one over another, and they would put it out to referendum. We have not had anybody ever come to that over my 23 years in the district. We've always been on an assessed value basis.
Thank you, Bob. Tony, here's a question for you. What if the cost of construction, and this is a good one, goes up because of tariffs or any other reason?
So the board is not allowed to spend 1 cent more than was authorized by the voters. It's actually a criminal offense. So Bob's a handsome fellow, but I don't think he would look good in orange. So with that in mind, when Dan prepared the plans and specifications that went to the DOE for approval, there's contingency in there, there's escalation in there. So the architect designs and estimates the project to make sure that that doesn't happen. And if worst case scenario, they would have to value engineer some of the projects or make some slight modifications to the project. But the board is required to deliver the projects approved by the public for no more than the actual cost approved by the voters.
And just to add to that, Tony, we are audited annually, and a huge portion of an audit when you have capital projects is a detailed accounting of each project. It's called construction in progress, and they look exactly at the referendum. They look at the questions and what the money was aligned to do for. So we cannot do that. As Tony says, it's something that BAs take very seriously. It is a criminal offense, and it can take your license. There are BAs that I know that have been brought up on charges and lost their licenses for mismanagement of referendum funds. That is not somewhere I need to be.
Thank you. Oh, Nita, I'm sorry, did you want to say something before I ask the next question?
No, I'm sorry, I accidentally unmuted.
No problem. So Bob, I do have another question for you then. Is there a place where we can see the itemized list of costs for each proposed project laid out?
I believe it's on our vote website. I think it's been there for since we opened the website a few months back. But yes, you can see a very detailed list of projects.
Thank you so much. Danielle, here's a question for you. Could the district refinance the bonds for a lower interest rate sometime over the 20-year borrowing term?
Yes, absolutely. So the rate that we receive on these bonds once the referendum is successful and we go to sell them is not, it is a fixed rate, but it isn't necessarily set for the entire 20 years. There will be a redemption provision or a call provision put into the bonds where we can refinance it if it reaches a certain savings threshold that is set by the state. And we're actually in process of refinancing the 2016 series from that referendum as it has currently reached the required savings.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that question. So I think that we've touched upon a lot of those questions, and I do want to get to some of the other experts that are on our panelists today. So let's return to hearing from the building people. We have two people here today that know best, Tollgate Grammar School Principal Melissa Laurie and Timberlane Middle School Principal Chris Turnbull. Mr. Turnbull, let's start with you and your experiences with the building needs at Timberlane.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teresa, and thank you everybody on the panel. At Timberlane, as it was stated, we do have a great deal of HVAC units that are in distress and that are struggling to operate effectively and efficiently. So this is my third year that I've been at the middle school, and in each of those years we've had to relocate classrooms during certain times of year, and sometimes for up to 2 weeks, which is pretty disruptive to the learning of the students when we talk about being comfortable and being ready to focus so that you are able to access the learning and the teaching going on. So and this has been in multiple parts of the building. It's not isolated to just one wing. It's been in both the C wing and the D wing that we've had issues. And as was addressed earlier in the discussion, one of our gyms is a location within the building and within the district that does not have air conditioning, and that's where our rock wall is located there, which is a part of the educational programming for our wellness department, and it is one of the areas that we use for wellness classes as well as extracurricular activities and multiple times throughout the day. So, the impact, while it is seasonal and while it does hit us harder in certain times of year rather than others, at the maximum, it forces us to move students around throughout the building and sometimes a different classroom each period. Based on the structure and the routine that they've built, especially our sixth graders, sometimes that can be tricky. But it also can just be a source of discomfort when we are asking adolescent students, and there are times it's like herding cats to get adolescent and preteen students to pay attention and to focus and lock in. So I need every advantage I can get over here. But those things are really helpful and parts of helping our students be ready to achieve at the rate that we want them to, and to access the things that our teachers are doing to help them.
Thank you so much. And I just must say, as a former principal and superintendent of schools, if you don't have heat or air condition and the conditions in the room are beyond what is acceptable by the Department of Ed, then we will be forced to close a school. And that is also one of the concerns that we have around a catastrophic failure of a HVAC system or a heating system. There's uncomfortable, and then there's this is not acceptable, and we're not allowed to have students in the building. So that's also something that we're concerned about. So thank you, Mr. Turnbull. I'd like to ask Dan, how do you propose to improve our architect? How do you plan to these proposed improvements would solve the issues that are happening at Timberlane?
Thank you. So Timberlane's a large school, right? It's in excess of 150,000 square feet. There's a lot of moving parts. I'm sure the district staff and Tom Quinn's crew could comment on, for instance, one of the largest pieces of that project is the HVAC that the principal just talked about. Its entire wings, the block C and D of that school, need HVAC. I believe those units are from the 90s in that range. Just like your house, when you have equipment that old, you plan on replacing it, and we're well past those useful life. And a lot of times those equipment parts aren't available anymore. So those are things that we're looking at in large scale at Timberlane. We're also looking at things like chillers for air conditioning that need to be replaced. Roofing is part of that, an additional sister well, things that the district has had to deal with over time. One of the things that you're seeing on your screen now is an entrance canopy and the walkway. We want to get rid of some of those areas in the concrete and make them a little more safe to walk on. And that canopy originally had areas to block rain. It no longer has that because it's deteriorated over time. We want to make it safe so it doesn't deteriorate anymore, and we want to offer the some smaller protection for students to come in from the rain. So we're looking to solve those issues, introduce good indoor air quality for students up to today's standards to help with that educational experience that the principal was talking about.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that. Ms. Laurie, could you talk about some of the needs, the challenges you have at Tollgate in terms of space?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Treese. Well, we are excited to be celebrating our 100th year of Tollgate. But as you can imagine, a 100-year-old building is filled with character and charm, but we do have some challenges. The classrooms that are located in the original part of the building, those classrooms definitely have less square footage than the classrooms that were put on in our primary wing in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And so the teachers, let's say they have a class 20 to 25 students. With the furniture, it gets to be extremely tight. So we often have to keep, for our 4th and 5th grade students, we have to keep the Chromebook carts and the bookcases in the hallways. So that can pose as a disruption to the educational experience of our students, distraction for the teacher as students are moving in and out of the classroom consistently just to obtain their materials. We also lack dedicated instructional space for each of our special area subjects. Currently, we have Spanish offered on a cart. So our Spanish teacher travels from classroom to classroom to offer instruction, and we do not have a dedicated space for STEAM. So we share space in the media center for our STEAM classes and our library classes. So any given day, we typically could be running 2 classes at the same time. As you can imagine, especially for our youngest learners, having another class going on, a few feet away can absolutely poses a distraction. The concern is that as enrollment increases, there is a potential for having to move some of our other special area classes on a cart. While not ideal, we would have to do what we had to do. The other thing that I wanted to make note of is we have excellent special education services here in Hopewell Valley. And so we have many students that have individualized education plans. And what some people might not know is that students that have IEPs that require a resource classroom setting, those class sizes are capped per state mandate. So there are times in Tollgate where I might have to use, a whole classroom to accommodate special education class needs. So I could have one large classroom that I have to, dedicate that space for students with IEPs with a cap of, 8 students in that classroom.
Thank you. And while we're talking about the space, could you also talk about what is the impact of having to hold classrooms in those modular trailers outside of your building?
Yes, so at Tollgate, we have 4 modulars, and we have our youngest learners, our kindergarten students are currently housed outside in the modular classrooms. They're housed in the modular classrooms because kindergarten students need to be in a space that has a bathroom. So do preschool students. And so within the building in Tollgate, we do not have enough classrooms currently that have a bathroom in the room or a bathroom in line of sight. So on a daily basis, regardless of the weather, rain, sun, sleet, you name it, our youngest learners have to move between the modular classrooms and into the building to access their music class, PE, art, as well as having lunch in the cafeteria. Of course, regardless of the age, kindergarten through 5th grade, we are not permitting any students to transition from outside in the modular classrooms to inside without being supervised by an adult. So we do have to ensure that those classrooms have aides with them throughout most of the day. There have been situations where a teacher in the modular classrooms will have to call the main office and have one of us leave whatever we're doing to go outside and transport a student into the nurse if there's a need.
Thank you. And I'm just going to toss this question in there because I know it came up about the cost of the nurses suite, which again, as Mr. Calavita shared, for those of you who might just be entering into this conversation, that the projects in the list of the itemized list are available on the website. But talk about the nurses suite, cost aside, the needs around that. We talked about the preschool and the kindergarten classrooms needing a bathroom. Talk about the nurses' experience in that building.
Sure. So recently through our 100-year celebrations, I came to find out from some of our old alumni who came through that the nurses suite used to actually be the principal's office. So it currently is in the center of the building, and it is the only school in the entire district that is not really set up to be a nurses suite. It's very small, so there's no privacy. And in addition, there is no bathroom, let alone a bathroom that is ADA compliant.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So if question 2 of the referendum passes along with question 1, we will be able to expand Bear Tavern so that we can bring all the students inside the building, which is one of the things that you talked about as a concern. Can you tell us a little bit more about the driveway situation for Tollgate?
Sure. So we have a very narrow driveway, as you can see here, between our modular classrooms and our building. And this is actually a passageway that our primary students, they'll exit the primary wing and they will head in this direction towards our backfield for recess. So currently that area, the passageway is extremely narrow to where, the largest fire truck in a fire company's, artillery of fire trucks would most likely not be able to pass if they were able to pass extremely narrow passageway. And we also have the students crossing modular and back into the building on the daily basis. So it does pose a safety concern that we do not have proper walkways for the children who are walking back and forth daily.
Thank you. Thank you for answering those questions and really talking about your building needs. Let's check and see if we have any questions about the building and spaces needs. Bob, items like heating and paving have previously been addressed through the annual budget. Why are items like walkways not included, walkways included in the bond referendum if you've been doing those over the years? Why is that included in the referendum?
So again, we have a very limited amount of money in our capital reserve and our basic budget to handle large-scale paving and concrete work. If you've ever had a driveway resurfaced recently, the cost of concrete and asphalt is extremely expensive. If we can get state aid to fund 40% of that kind of a project, that's the best place to do it, the best way to do it.
Thank you. And I said something that was inaccurate. I said that the itemized list is on there, and it actually, we don't itemize the list. They said that, we have a list of the project costs, but why aren't the individual costs for everything that is in that project on the website? Like, for example, if I'm doing a bathroom, why don't you have all the things that we're buying on that list?
So the district, as part of state purchasing law, the district must competitively bid all the projects that are being sought on this referendum. If we were to share specific architect estimates for this project, it would take away that bid advantage that we have. If you know, we put out there that a project was going to cost X, then bidders are going to realize that that's what we've budgeted for these projects. So we want to maintain the sanctity of the professional bid, or the secure bid process.
Dr. Treese, just want to add a couple of points to Bob's earlier comments on why something like a walkway, for example, may not rise to a project level. Besides the cost that he's mentioned and them being incredibly expensive, every time you have an emergency, we've had plumbing breakdowns, we've had water issues, where we would literally have to close the school if they were not resolved. We've had spent a whole period of digging up a hallway, for example. Those projects are fundamentally time sensitive. Obviously, you can't open the school if those aren't cared for, but any projects that you might have at the top of your list to do because they're just in the maintenance phase do get pushed down when those emergencies come. So we're always planning. Bob and Tom, Quinn and team are constantly prioritizing, but along the way with the age of our buildings, many things come along that might deprioritize, a replacement of a walkway at Timberlane, for example. Is it a high risk? Each time it breaks down, it is more of a risk, which makes it more necessary. But when you can't open your school because of a plumbing or water availability or what have you, that consumes your funds, right? So those are some of the reasons that I think might more clearly answer why some of these items that are on a referendum are getting handled now. It's the best way to get at them without waiting for an emergency to push it back down the list.
Thank you so much. Tom, wasn't this work, there's a question here about, wasn't a lot of this work done at Timberlane 2 years ago? Wasn't the HVAC work done? And why do we need to do that work now?
Okay. After the last referendum in 2016, through probably the end of 2018. Yes, there was a lot of work done on the HVAC at Timberlane. It included the cafeteria and most of the A wing, which is the oldest part of the building. What we're attacking now is the sections that were built in 1997 and still have original equipment from those. So we attacked on the first referendum the most critical parts that were failing at that time. Now we're moving on to the next parts. And we typically have, as Chris mentioned, several failures a year, especially in the winter months as coils freeze. So we need to address that system.
And Mr. Quinn, if I can jump in just on both to merge both of those points. The HVAC in particular has been ongoing in different parts of the building, and it is something that's been addressed on small scales in the past to keep things running, but the issues have been consistent in that time. And just as it related to smaller repairs or sidewalk and walkways, in my time here at Timberlane and then at Bear Tavern prior, there were a number of times where stairs, concrete stairs, things like that, and sidewalks that were emergent risks are handled, on a regular basis and a small scale basis. This is just a larger whole scale, full area.
Thank you for that. Mr. Peters, as a chair of the Finance and Facilities Committee, because I'm seeing these questions about, why is this ongoing? And we're seeing these projects that kind of seem like we're not on top of. Could you talk to a little bit about the Finance Facilities Committee's work every month as you look at these projects, the ones that we planned ahead for, and then the emergent ones that just pop up?
Yeah, definitely, Dr. Treese. Thanks. So I think it's really important for the community to know that when the Finance and Facility Committee meets every single week, Tom and Bob and the team bring to us kind of the what's going on situation. And depending upon that meeting, that what's going on situation could be everything from a small $16,000 to $20,000 project up to like last year at Hopewell Elementary with their boiler situation, which we know if we have a boiler that goes down in a school, regulations say, what do we have to do with that school? Shut it down. One of the things that we've started to talk about even more recently is this idea of how do we think about planning ahead? And I think the biggest challenge that I saw, that I faced when I started on the board 3 years ago, was it is extremely difficult to plan ahead as a school district in the state of New Jersey. And as we've alluded to several times on this webinar today, I am somebody who doesn't like to necessarily spend money. But when we think about the why and the why we have to spend that money, we have to address these facility challenges. And as Bob has alluded to, putting $1 million aside here and there is not going to make any sort of dent in what we need to do. So when we look at these projects, we ask for a comprehensive, holistic approach to say, what are the projects that are coming up? What are the needs that we're going to see over the next several years? What are the immediate needs? And we made that decision to say, let's address it now. Why? Because that's step one to the strategic plan that we're trying to put in place, right? And the more that we can get ahead of it by means of doing what we're asking the community to support us with, the best way that we think that we can build that strategic plan is to get ahead of the biggest chunk of dollars, which is going to be facilities. And then we can work closely with your administration on how we can continue to address the year-over-year costs in the budgeting process.
Thank you, sir.
Mark, if I could continue, Mark, I think that you said that planning in schools is hard. The planning isn't hard. It's the funding of the plan.
That's right.
I wanted to make, I think your point is well taken. I think I want the public to know we plan, and you can attest, and Anita and all of our finance business, we plan constantly, and we have lists of short-term, long-term, and projects we'd like to see done. It's just the funding. And there used to be, Mr. Solomini talked a little bit more about how the state wants to push you to referendum. There used to be a waiver in the budget annually that you could pick out X number of dollars worth of capital projects and get a waiver in your budget. The state got away from that. They said we want you to go to referendum so we can fund 40% of the projects. So they took that away. They took that mechanism of doing a small referenda, essentially a small referenda every year during the annual budget. They took that mechanism away.
Beyond that, Bob, you were talking about the strategies that we use, and the referendum being one of them the state kind of pushes you toward. There's a question here that also adds on to that. What is the administration team doing to manage raising costs of staffing and the possibility of reducing unneeded positions? And I can help you answer that, but my job is to try to assist the superintendent and her team into getting things done. Unfortunately, and Mr. Peters alluded this a short time ago, we are capped at 2%, and that 2%, we try to focus that money on educating the children of Hopewell Valley, and it goes towards the salaries and benefits of all the folks who work here. It goes towards the energy requirements. And look at your energy budget. What's happened to that over the summer? There's so many costs that are rising at a cost that exceeds 2%. Almost everything that we're doing right now is exceeding at 2%. And where does that money come from to cover that? It comes from the it comes from the maintenance budget. And Tom Quinn and I had a discussion. The only thing that's increased in his budget over the past 10 years since he's been here 10 years, the only thing that's gone up are salaries and energy and insurance, for that matter. The cost of supplies and the services that we've used has gone down, and more things have come up that we've got to address. I mean, last summer, we had to address, I think, in excess of $150,000 in tree removal, that we were approached by the Township of Hopewell and said, you remove these trees or we're going to fine you. So we had no choice, and they were a hazard. We admit that they were overlooking a walkway, and we had to spend $150,000 that could have gone towards boiler repair on tree removal. Thank you. And then to get back to this reduce unnecessary positions, Ms. Laurie spoke briefly about IEPs and students that are in self-contained classrooms for a variety of reasons. We have students that are multiply disabled. We have students that have autism. There are students that are in behavioral regulation classes, and these are really the best, least restricted, which we are required to do, settings for students to receive their education. And that's not done lightly. These are students that have significant needs. The state regulates those class sizes. So when you see a class size of 8 or 6 or these very small class sizes, that's because the population of students requires that, right? What have we done as a district to kind of to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible is we have had to eliminate positions, and none of these were unneeded. But that's why we see our class size creeping up. That's why we've lost some programming that we've had in the past. We have had to make those tough decisions, and it's not going to get easier moving forward. Things are not getting this. We're facing another very tough budget year where we have to really look at the programs that we offer and try to maintain what people move to this district to experience. And that's going to lead me right into another question that I see here that I would like Anita to help answer with me. And Dan, you can also tag on this. Don't national demographic trends show that shrinking school age populations over the country, right? So why does it appear that Hopewell is not following this trend?
Oh, so the fact is that our trend was declining along with the national numbers, and the fact that we are building now brings students in. We are very, very lucky here in the region to have amazing open space and not a lot of building. The downside to that is, numbers. The number of homes we have is kind of tapped out. It's at its max in general. So this new building, the requirements of affordable housing and the ratios of building market rate homes with our affordable housing means that we've got a whole mix of families moving in, and we're happy about that, but it means change and growth in ways that we haven't experienced. And I will toss it back to you, Dr. Therese, because I know that there is while decreasing in the past, historically, the decrease or decline in enrollment is important. Something about education has changed dramatically. That means we're using our space differently. So I think I just want to pop that back to you to answer.
Absolutely. That. We're using our spaces very differently. Since when our enrollment was shrinking, former leadership, and it was an excellent decision because it's best practices, did things like went from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten. So a classroom where you were able to get twice the number of kids in because you had them leaving half a day. My son had that experience. Now we had students all day, right? So that's using up more classroom space. While we don't have universal preschool, we do offer preschool for those students who need to start school early. But best practice also says that those students learn best when they are learning with students that do not have disabilities, if we have the ability to do that, right? That doesn't address those kids that are starting special that need that smaller space based on their needs. But having integrated preschool programs in the space that we had available to us is important. It's the best way to service our students, for example. Bringing kids back into district that in the past were sent out for behavioral needs, but their needs academically were not being met, because just because I have behavior dysregulation problems doesn't mean I'm not academically advanced. We found that we could not only meet those students' needs academically, but more cheaply than sending them out of district at to the tune sometimes of tuitions that were 6 figures, right? So all of those things are part of what's best practice, and that's part of the reason why people come to our district is because they're attracted to our district because of that. Dan, I saw you unmuted. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, Dr. Therese, thanks. I wanted to stress the importance of the board and the administration has done a ongoing job of due diligence with demographics, reporting, enrollments that are required by the state every 5 years for what we call your long-range facilities plan. Every 5 years, your districts, all school districts have to submit not only just projects, but they do enrollment projections. The state considers 5 years of projections. The board has, in the last 5 years, has seen an increase from the previous 5 years. Before that, trends were different. you're seeing an increase from the last 5 years with all the building going on. And you've had demographic reports to support that. And there's been studies showing utilization. The way that you're using your spaces, the flexibility, the plots, the types of spaces that we're planning for the school district, specifically with some of the additions to address those needs, are in a situation where you're addressing what you need now, and the state has a formula where in the 5 years projected out, you're looking at affordable housing that the board president had mentioned. You're looking at shovel in the ground, starting construction to address those needs. The board has done a great job of looking at those needs now and accommodating what it looks to come in the next 5 years. You've had projections out further, but those types of spaces and the numbers that you're looking at are being addressed now, and that's the important thing. And I want to stress the flexibility of the spaces to adjust in the future. Having a bathroom in a classroom is a great way to use that classroom in multiple ways. Having SGI, what we call SGI, small group instruction rooms that didn't exist 20 years ago for breakout spaces, are important for your educational needs, and it ties back into those projections over the last 5 years.
Thank you, Bob. And as we were talking about the developments, here's a question that I would like you to answer. Won't the district, someone asked, won't the district receive increased taxes for the new developments on Scotch Road, et cetera?
Unfortunately, the simple answer is no. Those properties, all the new properties that are part of the pilot, are excluded from the tax rate calculation. They do not go into the property values that go to the local tax assessor that calculates that percent share. So while they are paying something to the municipality of Hopewell Township, we do not, it doesn't go into the calculation. It doesn't mean we get shorted on money. Even if they were included in the calculation, we would still get the same money that when we strike a budget, we would still get the same amount of money. It's just divided up differently among the municipalities.
Thank you. And I'm going to answer this question because it ties into sort of these new developments coming in, and some of the concern that our community members who have school-age children who are in these classrooms where they're seeing the increased growth. So someone is asking, what can the district do to manage class sizes before the additions are built? So what I'm doing right now is managing class sizes because we don't have the opportunity to build those additions now. So what I'm doing is essentially doing targeted redistricting. I literally am in conversations constantly with any enrollment that happens, and we've had enrollment happening rolling throughout the year, which is not something that this district has experienced since I've been here, where students are still enrolling and are constantly enrolling as these new homes come online. And we're looking specifically at Bear Tavern and Stony Brook at grade levels. We're redistricting in small ways across the schools and adding bus routes and all of these things to try to, as best we can, manage these class sizes in response to the growth that we're seeing. Without those additions, that's going to continue, and there absolutely will be examinations of how we redistrict, because it's going to have to happen, folks. If the referendum passes and if it doesn't, the redistricting that will occur if it doesn't happen will be much more extensive than if it does, right? We're going to have to really look at, without that additional space, what can we do? And at some point, there's only so much redistricting we can do. Those class sizes will continue to grow. There is a question about expanding preschool. Right now, with the space that we're looking at, we're not looking to expand to full day, expanding our full day preschool, or even expanding our opportunities for preschool, working towards a universal preschool. We did a lot of work at working with our administrators and the New Jersey Department of Ed. There was some grant opportunities that were available. Now that has changed, where the district has to have that money up front. We don't have that money up front, nor do we have the space to increase preschool at this time. However, we are going to continue to examine that and see if we have opportunities to expand. And we do need to be ready to receive those preschoolers that are coming as our enrollment increases. So that's something we're going to continue to look at. But the additions that we're proposing now are not that move towards just adding preschool. So here is another question that Bob, new developments are being built in the south part of the township. Does the expansion proposal consider the project needs of the towns required under the master development plan, Or will there be additional school district needs when those developments are fully built out?
That's a tough question. Not, we are at this point, we're undergoing another demographic report that may be able to better understand that. Based upon the original demographic report we did when these original projects were noted, we should have the space to handle the enrollment from that. There's new projects that have come out after we struck that demographic report. It's hard to tell. I'm hoping that the new report that should be coming out within the next month may address that.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, but sorry about that, Dr. Treese. I was just maybe going to add on top.
No, please go ahead.
Bob's commentary there. I think one of the things that we as a Board of Education have been doing, knowing about these ongoing developments, is we've been in constant communication with Hopewell Township, Pennington Borough, and Hopewell Borough, that our ask has been simple. If these developments are coming up and there's conversations about doing developments that may enroll under the pilot program, that we be involved early, because the earlier that we can get involved, it enables us to plan better so that Dr. Treese, Bob Colavito, and the rest of the administration can look to address cost concerns and how they could blow up over time. So as long as we can continue to get and reinforce to those township officials and the borough officials of getting us involved early in these planning stages, I think that the Board of Education, I can speak pretty bluntly, that we feel comfortable that we're going to be able to stay ahead of what we expect additional population of kids coming into the district could be.
Mm-hmm. And
Mark, I think,
Mark,
I was going to say, to go further on that, I think that sometimes folks, when they don't include us, they don't completely understand the ramifications of adding the houses. So they say, oh, you can absorb the students, right? You have room in your buildings to absorb the students. What they don't understand is sometimes the students who are coming in may have different needs than what we have currently available. We may need more buses to transport those students. If you've driven through those new developments on Scotch Road, there's only one way in and one way out. So and when you come out of those developments, you can't make a left-hand turn. You've got to go around the other way. It detracts from how we would run a normal bus route. So if we were brought in and looked at how the plans are, we could say, you know what, if you bring in X number of students here, we're going to need 5 extra buses and we're going to need, this, that, or the other. Doesn't mean we can, it's different than just, can we absorb the students within our buildings? There's more intangibles to it than just that.
And that collaboration will help us all really consider the taxpayers in this. If we can have those planning sessions up front and really focus on how we do this in the best cost-effective and logistical way to make sure all the students are getting what they need, then we can we can kind of not have to keep having these asks. And know that we still have those lines of communication open with all 3 municipalities where we're trying to work through getting those upfront conversations before we already have these things built and they're not ideal to making sure that we can get students here in the best way and meet their needs in the way that we need to.
Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Treese, I just wanted to try to wrap in a little bit of a different part of the question or highlight your responses to answer a question in the chat about the fact that this feels like a big cost bubble that is coming up, and all of the things that are working against us. How do we make sure that in the next 10 years we're not going through the same thing again? And I think it's a great question because it goes to what you and Bob are saying, and Mark mentioned it as well. We're constantly in communication with the boroughs and the township to say what's coming down the pike. As we were able to plan, we did that. We did a demographic study with the township along, when we realized that these homes were coming on online. But as that has happened, we realize things are changing already. And so hence the demographic study phase 2. The conversation in the next decade is going to look like a series of those things. Checking in on the demographic study, listening to the townships and boroughs and what projects they have coming up, and until they are complete with their building obligations for affordable housing, we'll continue with that exercise. So just the things we are doing now will be the things that will continue to be actions to take over the next decade as projects build. And we can stay ahead of it and also include the challenges with transportation, other aspects, not just space, but the other aspects of cost.
Yeah, the needs that the students have when they come. But one of the things is that we are doing is we are in the middle of a new demographic study where they're examining the numbers they gave us when we did the last study, and the township is working in partnership with us to fund this. And what we've seen now since those developments have started to open, right? Because there was this idea that the students would not be coming in the numbers that they're coming, and they are coming into the housing in larger numbers than what the township may have expected, or even the demographer. So now that we're seeing what it looks like, we're going to get a new study. We're also going to be looking at ways that we can adjust our district map, our attendance zone, meaning redistricting, right? And then they're going to give us two options. What happens if this passes? What happens if it doesn't pass? Based on enrollment numbers that they'll look at in the middle of, we're getting close to the middle of this month that we'll have that enrollment for now. But as it still grows, know that the fact is the Department of Ed will only accept these projections 5 years out, because these developments, these ways of addressing basically lawsuits that have come to these municipalities about not having affordable housing. You never know how it's going to play out in terms of who comes to them with a project to build, whether or not they're going to ask for a pilot, or whether or not the municipality is going to accept that or not. So that's why we also have to be cognizant of these are 5-year estimates as best we can, based on that variable of you don't know how that's going to go beyond the 5 years. So I'm going to ask one more question here that's in the chat. Is there a possibility for us to get more state aid in the referendum? Are there other ways for the district to get state money or grants toward projects? I'm going to give that one to Bob and Danny if you want to help also.
Like I mentioned earlier, there are grants that come out, facilities grants that come out on a sporadic basis. There's no rhyme or reason. The government, the state of New Jersey, puts out a certain amount of money that can be accessed by all regular operating districts, as they're called. And if you have the money, you have to demonstrate having the money in advance to pay for them. If you can demonstrate that you have the money and the project meets the specifications of what they're looking for at that time, you can get money for that. As far as getting increased state aid, this is an annual debate, especially during a gubernatorial election in the state, of what the new governor is going to do regarding state funding. I'm not sure, I forget now because I'm getting old and I forget, but there used to be we used to get 4% cap on our funding. And when Governor Christie came in, he dropped it to 2%. A new governor could come in and say, we're going to allow you to increase your cap by 4%, which kind of alludes to, there was other question in the chat that talked about limitations and the state's limitations. There's not a whole lot that we can do regarding the limitations on the 2% cap. They give you certain waivers. The only thing that we can do to get more is to raise local revenue. And it's very hard to raise additional local revenue these days without a special type of project. We do what we can. We bring in tuition students from outside for various reasons. We rent our spaces that our local organizations use. We rent our field space. We rent our PAC. But again, we're renting it to folks who reside in town. So we don't really charge market rate for that. These are the local little leagues and the local basketball associations that use space. So, we do get something that covers the cost of the utilities and the custodians that run the building while they're in there. But there really isn't a whole lot of leverage with that 2% cap. It's a state law, and it's up to a governor and the legislature to decide that there's not enough, that schools need to have the ability to raise more in taxes. But that's the problem. To give us more spending authority, to enable us to invoke the plans that we make, increases taxes. And that's not really what we want to do. We want to find better ways for the state to pull in revenue. That's the long and short of it.
And then if I just might highlight that the district always is grant writing. Outside of that, we have ed foundations that support us as best they can. We have lobbied down in Trenton, and as a result of that work and our parents' donations and the work of lobbying downtown, we were able to get funding for an accessible playground that we'll be putting in soon. We are constantly looking for ways to bring in other funding outside of what's not available to us, unfortunately, coming out of state aid.
And unfortunately, just Doctor, one more thing on that. Some of the grants that are out there that we've applied for, because of the conditions of the grant, and it seems unfair, but because we are what's considered a wealthy school district, we are eliminated from a lot of that grants.
They go, yes, go ahead.
Two things to reinforce, and Bob hit the nail on the head on two of them. Like a ROD grant situation, a regular operating school district, the school district has to have the money up front. So you would still plan for the way that you do a regular project. And you have to pay 100% of the cost, and then you get reimbursed. So while the state does help out with the finances, you still have to plan and show you have the money locally. With a referendum, you're getting debt service aid. You're actually getting the money up front and paying it over the course of, Bob knows how to explain it, over a bond period. There was a time, and I think Tony Salamini might be able to comment on this, but there was a time when this state aid, the debt service aid, was not available. So the leveraging in one sense is it's available right now, and the school district it's advantageous to take advantage of it while it's offered, because that wasn't always the case. It's been around for 20 years, but there was a period in that 20 years. I see Tony, you unmuted, where it wasn't available.
Yeah, as Dan said, there have been periods where it hasn't been available. And with the advent of this law, which came into effect in 2000, prior to that, facilities aid was based on the wealth of a community. The change is now that the facilities aid is based on the project itself. So prior to 2000, you wouldn't have qualified for the same amount of aid because of the wealth of your communities. So now, to even the playing field, aid is given on the project itself and not based on the wealth of your community. So this is a really huge advantage for districts like yours for a chance to get some of that money where you otherwise would not be entitled to, because your community obviously doesn't get a lot of federal money, doesn't get a lot of state money. Here's kind of your one opportunity to get some of that revenue that you all pay into to come back to your community.
Thank you for that, Tony. And I know that we've run out of time, but I want to get this last question in, Anita. And I know that there are some questions that we maybe haven't gotten to. And at the end of my closing, I'll talk about ways that we can answer those questions beyond this virtual town hall. Anita, could you speak to answer this question, please? There's a question about the two elementary schools. Two of the elementary schools are being expanded, but two are not. So how is this going to help help us in our struggles right now if we're only doing the two and not the other?
So again, we are leaning into the demographic study and where the building is happening. So that fully pointed to initially Bear Tavern being the most impacted by the new build. But also the reality is we are a unique school district in that we're regional and that we have, the two boroughs and the township, but we are one community and we are responsible for all of our children equally. And any relief that happens in one school affects the other schools as well. So we always have aspired to have our kids attend the school closest to their home and in their community. And as we've grown, we've redistricted a number of times, but any relief in space from Bear Tavern means fewer children might need to be moved to Stony Brook, let's say. Any building in Tollgate would mean that kids that are coming in won't need to be moved to Stony Brook. And so it is kind of an all for one mentality. Our first goal is to keep our kids closest to their home, but we want to underscore again, especially as helping people understand question 2, is that any build within our community expands our collective ability to seat and house students.
Absolutely, because the other two schools have to fill in the gaps. So redrawing to reiterate with what Anita said, you redraw the attendance zones. So meaning those kids that currently go to Tollgate are shifted over to Hopewell, because you can't send Bear Tavern kids in that neighborhood all the way over to Hopewell Borough. You're shifting kids around the district to accommodate the fact that we're shifting in our enrollment because we are not expanding the two schools. So these are the two projects that we have in place, understanding that there will still be the need to withdraw those lines, and all four of those schools are impacted by the lack of growth, a lack of expansion in the two.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that. So we're going to start wrapping up so that we can stay on schedule. If you have a question that was not answered tonight, please email us at vote@hvrsd.org, and we will direct your question to the right person and reply to you. You can also learn as much as you can or much more on the referendum website that you can access through the district website. Also, follow us on our social media accounts, Hopewell Valley Schools, on our social media. We appreciate you joining us tonight and taking the time to be informed and to learn more about our referendum as voters. The bond referendum is part of the November 4th general election ballot, and you have 3 ways to vote. If you voted by mail in previous elections, you might already have received your mail-in ballot. If you still would like to apply, you can mail in your application, but know that those applications must be received by the county by October 28th. Early voting is also available for the general election from October 25th through November 2nd. The local early voting sites is at Pennington Fire Company. Of course, all regular poll places will be open on Election Day, November 4th. The polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can go to our website for an application forms and much more information about voting in this election. A recording from tonight's forum will be posted on the site and the district social media accounts. Again, we thank you so much for joining us, and thank all of our panelists for sharing their expertise and experiences with our community. Stay tuned for the district's communication channels for more information, and remember, vote on or before November 4th. Thank you and have a good night.